Most people spend their whole lives chasing money. They go from one paycheck to the next promotion to the latest stock tip, and more often than not, they end up exhausted, broke, and wondering where all that time went. I've seen it happen over and over. If you give me a few minutes, I'll share the kind of money advice that normally takes decades to learn. Over the years, I've watched people lose everything they've built. But when I look back, I realize that the real goal was never the money. The money was just the scorecard. The brutal truth is that money is actually a consequence. It's a byproduct of getting certain key areas of life in order. If you fix these 5 things, money tends to follow. If you ignore them, you'll likely struggle for the rest of your working life. Number 1, get rid of bad debt. I'm a big believer in using debt, real estate debt in particular, but this is good debt. Debt that tenants pay off for me. The other kind of debt is the single biggest destroyer of wealth in America, bad consumer debt. Right now, household interest payments are running somewhere between 20 and 30%. Even President Trump talked about this at Davos, pointing out that the high cost of credit card debt is crushing the middle class. Here's a simple example. Imagine you have 10 grand on a credit card at 20% interest, and you try to invest that same 10 grand in stocks, targeting an 8% return. Is that person being smart? Or are they just digging themselves a deeper hole? Let's do the math. $10,000 at 20% interest creates a $2,000 expense every year. $10,000 earning 8% generates $800. That's a $1,200 annual loss, about $100 a month in the red. Why would anyone do that? Yet that's exactly what countless people are doing when they pile up credit card debt while chasing stock returns. I personally consider bad debt anything above 8%. It's extremely hard to reliably earn more than 8% unless you're actually selling an asset. As far as I'm concerned, I like to hold assets and focus on ones that cash flow. An 8% cash-on-cash return is very comfortable for me. But if I'm earning 8%, I certainly don't want to borrow at 8% because that leaves me with a net zero. I've said before that buying liabilities like clothes, vacations, or cars on credit is essentially stealing from your future. People often ask what I mean by that. What I mean is this. Passive income should pay for those things, not your W-2 job. Passive income comes in month after month, regardless. If that income is being paid off by someone else, like a tenant, then all you need to do is keep the property occupied. When you buy a liability on credit, you're pulling from your future self. And you absolutely cannot outinvest a 20% interest rate. For me, the upper limit is 8%. Beyond that, the game becomes mathematically stacked against you. There's also the freedom that comes from having no consumer debt payments. So the very first step I recommend is to pay off all your bad debt as quickly as possible. Number 2, now that the bad debt is gone, you need an engine. You need something that makes money while you sleep. For me, that engine has always been real estate, but it doesn't have to be real estate for you. I like real estate because you can use other people's money, and more importantly, someone else pays it off for you. Over my 40 years in the business, I've invested in gold mines, oil wells, and stocks. I haven't done great on all of them. Even when I did well, I sold, paid taxes, reinvested, and then lost it again. For me, real estate has been by far the most reliable because tenants cover the payments. When I talk about being the captain of your own ship instead of just a passenger, this is what I mean. When you buy crypto or a stock, you're really a passenger. But when you buy real estate with borrowed money and have someone else pay it off, you're in the driver's seat. One common trap I see is the appreciation trap. Say an investor buys a house just hoping the price will go up next year. The problem with that strategy is simple. It's speculation, not investing. Nobody knows if prices will rise in the short term. What I always look for is this. First, I buy something someone else pays off, and second, something that offers forced appreciation. I look for properties with a story. For example, I like buying units that already have washer and dryer hookups, but no actual appliances. By adding washers and dryers, I can add $50, $75, or even $100 a month in extra rent, depending on the market. That extra income covers the cost of the appliances and then flows directly to the bottom line. More importantly, it drives up net operating income, which forces appreciation on that asset. That's very different from an investor who focuses only on price appreciation. Now consider a cash flow investor. Why is cash flow the only thing that truly protects you during a market crash? When the market tanks, prices can drop, but if the rent still covers the mortgage and expenses, you're in a much safer position. At that point, you can hold, wait for the cycle, and avoid being forced to sell. Number 3, the mindset and mental health piece. You cannot build $1 million portfolio with a $10 mindset. I've had family members who refuse to spend a nickel on anything, yet still tell me real estate is too risky. Fixing your mindset isn't just about feeling good, it's about resilience. Investing can be emotional. When the market plunges, your brain screams sell. When it's booming, your brain screams buy. Often both impulses are wrong. One reason people rely so heavily on wealth managers and financial planners is that they're not actually investing themselves. They hand their money over to someone else and let that person make the decisions. Logically, it's hard to justify that. The money is theirs, yet they outsource the entire process because they don't feel comfortable doing it themselves. Let me go back to a concrete example: the 2008 crash. While everyone around me was panicking and selling, and banks were taking on tons of real estate, I did something different. I started asking why international investors were still putting money into the United States. When the US housing and banking markets were getting hammered, overseas investors were quietly buying. That told me something important. They were buying low. At the time, listings in the US climbed to around 4 million homes, the highest level in a long time, if not ever. While domestic investors were watching the same headlines and spiraling like everyone else, I looked at the crisis as a buying opportunity. Real estate had been massively repriced, and that was a chance to load up on assets. Most people were too close to the situation and couldn't see clearly. I went outside the US and partnered with a Canadian firm. We raised money through Canadian retirement savings plans and bought a portfolio of apartments in Texas and Arizona. Today's market is different from 2008, but cycles still matter. I've managed real estate through every cycle since the 1980s and now own more than 10,000 units in a portfolio worth roughly $2 billion. The shifts coming in 2026 will likely create new millionaires and wipe others out. Which side you land on depends largely on what you do in the next 12 months. When I invested back in 2008, I wasn't acting on emotion. My decisions were structural, predictable, and tied to the cycle. While everyone else was mourning the past, I saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That one shift in perspective made all the difference. People often ask me about fear. I've said that fear is one of the biggest destroyers of wealth. Here's what I mean. How does an emotional investor actually lose money? The key isn't more courage or another seminar or even a video like this. What changes behavior is education. The more you understand markets, cycles, and the mechanics of real estate, the less fear you feel. When you surround yourself with the right team and knowledge, your decisions are based on structure, not panic. Fear is usually a sign of inexperience. First-time real estate investors often talk about fear because they don't fully understand what they're doing. As you gain experience, fear doesn't disappear, but it does shrink. Experienced investors look at a crash not as a reason to sell, but as a possible buying window. So I always say this: rich is a number, wealth is a mindset. Rich is often short-term, transactional, and focused on the next deal. Wealth is long-term and structural. For me, that means thinking in terms of legacy. It means working on plans so that my kids and even my grandkids can keep and grow what I've built. The rich guy lies awake at night, trying to figure out how to repeat his success. The truly wealthy person sleeps well because the system is in place. This leads to the fourth lesson, and it's the hardest one of all. Looking back over the last 40 years, it feels like 40 minutes. Time flies. Young people think they have forever. I hear 25-year-olds say, "I'll start investing when the market is perfect," or "I'll start that business after I gain more experience." Just recently, I was at my older son's house and saw two very different approaches. One person, 18 years old, had bought a house 4 years earlier, and in that time made about $200,000 on it. Another was a 25-year-old who had graduated and gone into real estate development, but hadn't completed a single deal yet. When I asked how many deals he'd done in the last year, the answer was 0. How about the last 2 years? Still 0. Meanwhile, the 18-year-old had already bought a single-family home. What's the difference between those two people? Why can someone act at 18 while another stays on the sidelines after years of education? The answer is that time is non-refundable. Every dollar you waste on bad debt is time you'll have to work to earn it back. Every dollar you invest into cash-flowing assets buys you more freedom and more time in the future. Number 5, the why family. I want to pause here because if you do everything I've outlined so far, you're on track to get rich. But I know a lot of rich people who are deeply unhappy. They traded their families for their bank accounts. I've learned the hard way that children equate love with time. They want twice the time and half the money. They don't care as much about the toys as they care about you being present. Many entrepreneurs wear busy like a badge of honor. They ignore their spouse and their kids and say, "I'm doing this for your future." In reality, they're often doing it for their ego. I fell into that trap early on. When my kids were young, I was flying back and forth to Portland every week for a major project called McCormack Pier, located along the Willamette River between the Broadway and Steel Bridges. It was a huge, complex project with countless moving parts. Every week, I would stop at Pal's bookstore, buy a book for each of my kids, and bring it home. I thought I was doing something special, but what I was really missing was the entire week. I was home on weekends, but absent during the weekdays. I justified it like so many others do. There's no child who looks back and says, "Thank God my dad brought me that book." That pushed me to make a conscious decision. I would never repeat that pattern. During that same period, I spoke with one of my mentors. He told me the secret to staying connected with your kids is this: take off every spring break, fall break, summer vacation, and 3-day weekend while they're out of school. It's extremely hard, but I did it. I would literally move to another state with my kids for the summer and spend the entire time with them, one-on-one. No work, no distractions. I would wake up at 5 a.m., get my work done, shut the computer down when they woke up at 9 a.m., and be fully present all day. The result was that I was with them for every holiday, every spring break, fall break, and summer vacation. We played golf, went boating, rode bikes, and just spent time together. While they were out of school, I was off work. If you're working 80 hours a week to provide, you're sending a message to your kids that money and career are more important than they are. That's something to reflect on. If you fix your mental health, eliminate your bad debt, build cash-flowing assets, prioritize your family, and respect your time, money will almost inevitably follow. It becomes the natural consequence of a life that's structured, intentional, and well-lived. Take this advice to heart and consider what comes next.